How does the Battle of Shrewsbury 1403 redefine English longbow warfare techniques on the blood-soaked terrain of Hateley Field? The rebellion begins in Chester, where Henry Hotspur Percy raises the White Hart of Richard II. He gathers his elite Cheshire archers, men who once served as the personal bodyguard of a fallen king, ready to challenge the Lancastrian usurper. The king moves with unexpected speed from Burton-on-Trent, pivoting his army to intercept the northern threat before the rebels can unite with Welsh allies. This rapid mobilization turns a political dispute into a desperate race for survival. Why does Hotspur choose the city of Chester as his primary staging ground for the rising? The palatinate of Cheshire remains loyal to the memory of Richard II, making it the perfect forge for a new rebel army. Hotspur recruits 200 retainers and thousands of men-at-arms, banking on the region's hostility toward Henry VII to swell his ranks. He expects a slow royal response, but the king is already marching north to support the northern border. This recruitment drive transforms local grievances into a full-scale civil war. How does King Henry IV react when the news of the Percy rebellion reaches him at Burton-on-Trent on July 12? The king acts with lightning decisiveness, realizing that his crown depends on his ability to strike before the Percy family can consolidate their power. He abandons his Scottish campaign and turns his heavy cavalry west, racing across the Midlands to catch the rebels in the marches. His logistics are strained, yet he pushes his men through forced marches toward the strategic crossroads of Shrewsbury. This aggressive maneuver forces Hotspur to accelerate his advance toward the Welsh border. What is the strategic significance of the 9-day race for the town of Shrewsbury? Both commanders understand that the town is a vital transport hub and a center for the wool trade, a prize that could change the outcome of the campaign. Hotspur marches south through the heat of July, gathering a force that grows to 10,000 men, including the legendary Longbowmen of the north. Meanwhile, Prince Hal holds the town with a small garrison, waiting for his father's main force to arrive. This frantic dash determines who will hold the tactical advantage of the River Severn. What does Hotspur find when he finally reaches the outskirts of Shrewsbury on July 19th? He expects an empty town, but sees the standard of the Prince of Wales flying high over the stone walls. Prince Hal has secured the bridgeheads and the garrison, denying the rebels the shelter of the fortifications and the protection of the river. Hotspur realizes he cannot take the town by surprise, forcing him to halt his advance and rethink his entire strategy. This defensive stand by the young prince prevents a rebel occupation and buys time for the royal army. How does the arrival of King Henry IV on July 20th change the tactical landscape of the war? The king wins the race by a mere few hours, linking his forces with Prince Hal and blocking Hotspur's path to his Welsh allies. Hotspur is forced to withdraw to the village of Berwick, 3 miles to the northwest, as the royalists take control of the southern crossings. The rebel army is now isolated on the north side of the town, cut off from Owain Glyndŵr's approaching forces. This successful intercept places the king in a position of strength. Why does Hotspur choose the ridge at Hateley Field for his final stand against the crown? The terrain offers a slight elevation that provides clear sightlines for his Cheshire archers and a natural barrier against heavy cavalry charges. He positions his infantry behind a field of peas, where the tall, dense vines are woven together to create a tangled tripwire for any advancing knight. This tactical choice forces the royalist army to approach uphill into the teeth of the rebel fire. The selection of this high ground turns a simple field into a lethal killing zone. How does the morning parley on July 21st attempt to avert the coming slaughter between former allies? The king sends the abbot of Shrewsbury to offer a full pardon, hoping to preserve the lives of his former friends and save the realm from more blood. Hotspur is inclined to listen, but his uncle Thomas Percy acts as the diplomatic saboteur. Worcester meets with the king only to trade insults, returning to the rebel camp with lies about the king's true intentions. This breakdown of trust ensures that the negotiations fail and the swords are drawn. How do the two armies deploy as the summer sun begins to set 2 hours before dusk? Henry IV divides his 14,000 men into 3 divisions, placing Prince Hal on the left flank and the Earl of Stafford in the center. The rebels stand firm on the ridge, their 10,000 men forming a dense shield wall supported by thousands of war bows. The king's heralds call for the final advance as the two sides stare across the pea field at the livery of their brothers. This rigid deployment sets the stage for the first massed archery duel. What happens when the first volley of the Cheshire archers strikes the royalist lines? The air turns black as thousands of arrows are unleashed in a continuous storm that chroniclers describe as a thick cloud. These longbows, with draw weights reaching 160 pounds, send steel-tipped bodkin heads through plate and gambeson alike. Men fall like leaves in autumn, as the volume of fire suppresses any attempt at a coordinated charge. This initial barrage decimates the royalist vanguard and shatters the morale of the leading armoured knights as they struggle uphill. How does the royalist centre react to the intensity of the rebel arrow storm? Under the command of the Earl of Stafford, the centre division struggles through the tangled vines, only to be met by a lethal hail of fire. Stafford is struck down, and his men break rank, fleeing the field as the Cheshire archers maintain their relentless rate of fire. The king watches as his right wing dissolves into a panicked retreat, leaving his own position vulnerable to a rebel counterattack. This collapse of the centre nearly ends the Lancastrian dynasty in the first hour. Why does the left flank, under Prince Hal, remain steady while the rest of the royal army wavers? The 16-year-old apprentice warrior leads his division with a calm that belies his youth, pushing his men forward against the rebel right. He understands that the only way to survive the archery is to close the distance and engage in hand-to-hand combat. Despite the carnage around him, Hal keeps his men-at-arms focused on the objective, maintaining the pressure that prevents a total rebel victory. This steady advance on the flank begins to tilt the tactical balance back. What occurs when a rebel arrow strikes the future Henry V full in the face during the melee? A stray shaft from the Cheshire lines penetrates 6 inches into the prince's skull, lodging firmly in the bone beside his nose. Blood pours from the catastrophic wound, yet Hal refuses to leave the field, fearing that his departure will cause his men to lose heart. He stays in the thick of the fight, with the arrow still embedded in his face, to show his soldiers that the king's blood is not easily spilled. This act of iron will preserve the wing. How does Hotspur attempt to end the battle with a single decisive stroke as his lines begin to thin? Realizing that the royal numbers are beginning to tell, the Star of the North gathers the Earl of Douglas and his elite cavalry for a desperate charge. They aim directly for the king's standard, believing that if Henry IV dies, the rebellion will instantly succeed. They cut a bloody swathe through the royalist centre, charging with such fury that they appear unstoppable. This concentrated assault focuses the entire war onto the life of a single sovereign. How does the king's use of deception protect him from the rebel charge? Hotspur and Douglas strike down Sir Walter Blount and several other knights who are dressed in the royal livery to serve as decoy kings. The king has strategically placed these men to confuse the enemy, and the rebels believe they have already won as they butcher the false sovereigns. They shout in triumph, unaware that the real Henry IV is fighting elsewhere on the field. This misdirection wastes the momentum of the rebels' most dangerous maneuver and leaves them exposed to counterattack. What do the rebels find when they realize their leader has fallen in the middle of the melee? In the confusion of the general charge, Hotspur momentarily lifts his visor to catch his breath when a random arrow strikes him in the eye. He falls dead in an instant, and the news of his demise spreads through the ranks like a wildfire. The royalists take up the cry, shouting that Henry Percy is dead, while the Northumbrian knights look in vain for their commander's signal. This sudden loss of leadership turns a focused attack into a directionless struggle. How does the death of the Star of the North trigger the total collapse of the rebel lines? Without Hotspur to guide them, the rebels lose the will to face the growing pressure from the king's remaining divisions. The shield wall shatters as men-at-arms turn to flee toward the rear, pursued by the royalist cavalry who have finally overcome the pea-field obstacles. The retreat becomes a massacre as the victorious royalists cut down their former countrymen in the gathering twilight. This total collapse of the rebel lines ensures that the House of Lancaster survives its most dangerous trial. Why do the royalist forces focus their pursuit on the fleeing Cheshire archers and Northumbrian knights? The king intends to leave no doubt about the outcome of the struggle, ordering his men to run down the remnants of the rebel army before they can regroup. The night air is filled with the sounds of slaughter, as the pursuit continues for miles beyond Hateley Field. By the time the moon rises, the rebellion is effectively extinguished, and the survivors are hunted through the woods of Shropshire. This relentless pursuit prevents any further organized resistance from the northern magnates. What is the scene at the marketplace in Shrewsbury on the morning of July 23rd? The king orders Hotspur's body to be exhumed and propped up between two millstones to prove to the realm that the rebellion is over. The Earl of Worcester is beheaded for his treason, and the heads of the rebel leaders are sent to the four corners of the kingdom as a grim warning. The Field of Peas is now a field of corpses where thousands of Englishmen lie in mass burial pits. This brutal display of justice serves to dismantle the Percy family's prestige. How does the surgical miracle of John Bradmore preserve the future of the English crown? The court surgeon uses honey-infused elderpith to dilate the horrific facial wound before inserting custom-designed hollow tongs to grip the arrowhead. He extracts the metal from the prince's skull, a feat of medieval medicine that restores the hero of Agincourt to health. Hal is left with a deep scar, a permanent reminder of the day the longbow turned against its own people. The deeper struggle between emperors and popes, and the schools and legends that grew from these conflicts, deserve their own episode. Which next episode should we explore to continue this deep dive into history? If this analysis of the Battle of Shrewsbury helped you understand the power of the longbow, scan the QR code on your screen to subscribe and continue the series. We have more stories of warriors and kings waiting for you to discover. Scan now and join our community of history enthusiasts.